Hi everyone, and welcome to this next speaker event about networking and research. Why is it important, and why should you learn this as a student? So this is going to be presented to you by Stuti Chakraborty, who is an occupational therapist at Christian Medical College, Vellore. So just a quick intro. Stuti Chakraborty recently completed her undergraduate degree and is currently working as an occupational therapist at Christian Medical College, Vellore. Her contributions to the field of healthcare are specifically centered around research, raising awareness, communication, and advocacy. She was selected as one of the 3 young persons on behalf of the United Nations Major Program for Children and Youth to represent India at the Global Conference on Primary Healthcare, organized by the WHO and Ministry of Health of Kazakhstan in 2018. She has represented her country at various occasions in the past, was one of the few people selected from India to attend the Harvard Medical School and MIT Healthcare Innovation Bootcamp in 2019, and is also currently a Harvard Public Health Review Fellow for the 2021 cohort. Her major areas of work include raising awareness about the impact of disability on marginalized communities, young people, and women. In the past, she has been an active contributing member of various youth-focused organizations, such as the Global Healthcare Workforce Network, Youth Hub, and Your Commonwealth. She is part of the UK COVID Neurocollaboration, through which she has contributed to research in the field of COVID-19 and its implications on the nervous system. She has also been involved with research surrounding public health, especially she co-founded Stimulus in 2020. Stimulus is a youth-led nonprofit initiative which aims to raise awareness about the brain sciences, counter ableism, and is also currently attempting to work towards raising awareness regarding STEM fields among young girls and high schoolers. So these were a few of Stuti's credentials and achievements. And Stuti, with that being said, thank you so much for being here, taking the time out of your busy schedule to present this for our attendees and participants. I'm going to hand it over to you now. Just a minute, everyone. Looks like the speaker got disconnected.
Hi, can you see me, hear me?
Yeah, hi. Did you get disconnected?
I think so.
Yeah, so I just introduced you, so you can go ahead and start off if you're ready.
Yes, I am. All right, so I'm just going to start sharing my screen. Can you make me co-host so I can share?
Yeah, just 1 second. Should work now.
All right, do you see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so good evening, good morning. I don't know if you all are up in the middle of the night for this, but thank you so much for joining. I just thought I'll do a little bit of a very basic introduction to networking and research and why you should start off as a student. I know that many of you part of simply neuroscience, and many of you interested in neuroscience are or just other fields of STEM and healthcare or engineering in general are very interested in research. And so I thought it would be quite interesting and important at this juncture to do a session on this, especially because there's a lot of free time on everybody's hand right now because of the pandemic. And this is a really great time to get started off with research. Even though we are dealing with the pandemic globally, but those of us who do have the time should definitely utilize this for getting started off with research. All right. So All right, so a little bit about me. I know that Inchara already introduced me, but I'm a recent graduate in occupational therapy, and I'm currently doing this thing called as a bond, which is a mandatory clinical service obligation that is required of me to do. And in fact, I'm actually a very good friend and colleague of Komal's, who was the previous presenter, and both of us right now are doing our bond obligation. Um, so I'm currently working in a brain injury rehabilitation unit where I'm responsible for planning the rehabilitative management for people with stroke, traumatic brain injuries to the brain due to road traffic accidents and other kinds of things like hypoxic ischemic encephalopathies, metabolic disorders of the brain, and the whole spectrum of it. So my research interests of work, the most updated ones are right now I'm working as a research assistant at the Language and Cognitive Neuroscience Lab, led by Dr. Peter Gordon at Teachers College, Columbia University. And I have roughly about 8 publications in international peer-reviewed journals, which honestly came out in the span of like 1 year since the beginning of the pandemic. Because before that, when I was a student, I didn't really have like a lot of time, but even though I did start off with networking and research as a student, but most of my publications came out in 2020 and have been coming out since the beginning of this year as well. There are 2 currently which are in the pipeline and under peer review, and they're up on preprint servers, and then there are 2 more that I'm working on. So roughly about 14 to 15 research papers that I have been currently that have been doing over the past 1.5 or so years. I have also been an advocate for the United Nations Major Group for Children and Youth at your Commonwealth, HIFA, Global Health Workforce Network Youth Hub, the National Science Policy Network. Actually, interestingly, one of the papers that I wrote on accessibility to assistive technologies for people with disabilities in low and middle income countries versus high income countries and addressing the divide gap was presented through the Journal of Science Policy and Governance run by the AAAS, which is the American Academy for the Advancement of Sciences, and it was presented to the UNCTAD, that is the United Nations Commission on Technology, Science and Technology for Development, and it was presented at the high level forum to kind of advocate for people with disabilities. So that is also something that I'm really passionate about because I work with people with disabilities on a day-to-day basis. And I've worked with these organizations in various capacities. And finally, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Stimulus, which is my brainchild, and it is another organization that is, again, part of the Simply Neural Network, and is another youth-led initiative that aims to raise awareness about the brain sciences, human behavior, and focuses on fostering outreach and advocacy abilities. And one of my other co-founders, Shreya, is going to be talking today at a later time, and hopefully you can attend her session as well because it's really interesting. All right, so these points, I just thought I'll put them out here before I go into the networking and the why and how of it. And these tips are based on my personal experience. That's why I said it's a personal narrative. And it's based on what worked for me. And it's also, of course, based on things that I have seen on the internet and taken off of the internet and from the networking that I have done thus far and I continue to do as somebody starting out in professional or academic research. So I think that in order to be a good researcher, you need to conceptualize, ideate, create. It's more of like, being an artist, to be very honest, than being a scientist, because that's something that I feel, because you need to think about new things all the time. You need to have a keen eye for where is the gap, what is lacking, and what needs to be addressed. And you need to go in there and see a nitpick on what you really can focus on in terms of your research papers or the studies that you can do and what needs to be addressed. Secondly, you need to be passionate about research, and this is not just for research. It needs to be passion. You need to have passion for whatever you do in life, whatever field you choose, whether it's advocacy, whether it's working a 9 to 5 job, whether it's doing research, anything and everything. If you're not doing it with passion, it's just going to be very monotonous for you. Then be committed to a cause. So in my personal case, my cause is to alleviate, neurodisabilities, neurological disorders, and help improve the quality of life of people who suffer from neurological disorders. And so it has to be cause driven. I really think that if you're doing research without a purpose or without a sense of purpose, it's kind of, wasting your time, wasting your efforts. And because you will not be able to replicate your results and keep giving good output each and every single time if you're not doing it for a cause and if you're just doing it for the sake of doing it. Next thing would be to have great time management skills, prioritizing abilities, and the ability to handle multiple tasks. I cannot emphasize on the importance of this enough, because I know that I have to multitask a lot because I have a full-time job at the hospital, which is around 8 hours every day, and except for on Sundays that I get off. And then on top of that, I come back home and I focus on my research work, because during my shift work at the hospital, I'm doing mostly clinical work, and so my research work is kind of like an extracurricular thing that I'm doing after my work hours. So you need to be able to manage your time and prioritize what you want to do every single day. And you should be able to handle multiple things at one go. And I think this really helps, especially when, in the later stages of your career, when you are starting out, you have your own lab, you have to work on grants, you have to supervise students, PhD students or graduate students in your lab, you have to supervise undergraduate students, you have to focus on teaching, you have to focus on reading literature and coming up with new studies, ideas for studies. And so all of that requires a huge level of multitasking and prioritizing. So you need to see what you need to do first, because you need to, for example, getting the grant should be a first priority, because without the grant, you might not be able to focus or continue with your research. So you need to know what you should prioritize one after the other. Then, of course, you need to be good with people, good at teamwork, and have good communication abilities, because that is important. And not just in research, but in more or less every field that requires collaboration. Understand the demands and requirement of pursuing a career in research. You need to have a lot of resilience, especially when you're writing up the paper, you're doing your experiments, and they keep failing. You have to rerun the whole setup again. Sometimes it can just be something as small or something as trivial as a failure in the equipment, like you're setting up the equipment and you're not able to troubleshoot and the whole system fails. And then you probably took 3 hours setting it up. Everybody in your lab stayed back, didn't have lunch, didn't do any of those things. And you have to do the whole thing all over again the next day. So there has to be a lot of resilience in terms of, and perseverance, if I may, in terms of like just being very persistent and being consistent with your ability to just come back and do it all over again and do it again and again. And also you need to have a lot of patience, because once you are done with your paper, you send it out for peer review, or even before you send it for peer review, you send it to 2 or 3 people to proofread it, and they come back to you with a lot of comments that might be at times very annoying or irritating, because they're nitpicking at every small single thing. There can be even people who critique your work and they do not give constructive criticism, but they actually give destructive criticism. So you need to know how to take it in your stride. So all of those things put together need to be very, very focused on in terms of pursuing a career in research. So you need to be aware of those things even before you start networking, because you need to know, especially something that I'm going to cover later on is like getting responses from people who are currently doing research, professors, and all of that. I'm going to cover that in a little bit. But if they are not responding to you, you cannot just give up. You need to have a lot of patience when it comes to that aspect as well. And then come up with questions. So not afraid to ask questions and seek more. So because you need to create and ideate so much, you need to come up with primary questions that you want to address and that you would like to address and that are currently not being addressed. So this comes up only when you have that inquisitive spirit within yourself, and you're not afraid to ask questions. I know that in the Indian curriculum, during the early years, I think things are changing now. Hopefully things are changing now, but we kind of were discouraged, or used to be discouraged, if we are asking like too many questions, or if you're asking even silly questions, we were looked down upon. People were condescending. So I think that's wrong, and it kind of suppresses your inquisitive spirit. So do not let that happen. If there is even one professor in your college or in your school, there is a teacher who encourages your inquisitiveness, who encourages your ability to ask questions, even if they are stupid. Follow through with them, hang on to them, and keep chasing them with your questions, because that's one of the greatest ways to get started. Okay, so something that you should also keep in mind is to identify your research interests. Um, so ask questions, and also, sorry, I know that I've been talking about asking questions. If any of you do have any questions, please feel free to just unmute yourself, interrupt me, and fire away. I'm happy to take your questions now as well. It doesn't necessarily have to be towards the end. All right, so ask a lot of questions and read a lot. So one thing that I think played to my favor was the fact that I used to read a lot ever since I was a child. I grew up reading a lot of books, but when I joined medical college, that kind of it fell back, it fell through. It kind of disappeared. I stopped reading books, but I'm happy that I have been able to still continue my passion of reading and my ability to read and consume information, even and turn that into something related to research, because I have been able to pursue through with research, because I have been able to read a lot of literature. And the only thing that I would like to mention again here is that reading a lot does not mean that you read only scientific papers with big words and a lot of jargon. You can read books that talk about an area of interest that interests you, right? So if it's neuroscience, it can be anything, like a neuroscience related book. It can be a neuroscience blog. It can be a neuroscience magazine. It can even be reading things on Twitter, and I'm going to come to Twitter later on, but Twitter is honestly one of the best spaces out there right now to learn what's happening in academia. And it comes to you in under 160 characters. So you can get a synopsis and a gist of everything that's happening very, very early. All right, so then the next thing is exploring your area of interest in great detail. I think that's really important, because you might have a very broad area of interest, like something like, for example, let's say for me, it's neurodisabilities. So that's quite broad. But what in neurodisabilities? I did not figure that out at the first go itself. I realized more and more as I read up, or as I networked with people, or as I ventured into doing more research, that my specific area of interest lies in, stroke or perceptual abilities, or things like that. For you, it might be language abilities in stroke, or for somebody else, it might be something completely different altogether, like for example, pervasive developmental disorders or attention related disorders in children. So how do you come up with your area of interest? That comes only when you explore, because only when you explore, you know the various options and ideations that are out there and what kind of research that has been going on. And this exploration can come if you follow through journals, papers, academics on social media handles, or on LinkedIn, or you just read blogs that come up. For example, Science Magazine has a lot of good blogs that are coming up every single day. Then there is Scientific American. Sorry, excuse me. There's Research America. Depending on whatever country you belong to, there's a vast range of things that are out there. So you can keep reading them. You can even read the scientific sections of newspapers, like for example, the Washington Post. Even Times of India has like a scientific section. So you can read those things if you want. And that can also give you an idea about different things that are related to the field of science. Then try developing critical analysis skills. The more you read, the more questions arise. And this is very important, because if you read, you will come up with questions. If you do, because you will be able to understand what is out there. If you don't know what is out there, you will never be able to come up with more questions. So the analysis of, the critical analysis, to nitpick on things, to critically look at things from a very sort of critical lens, will come once you read more and more, because then you will be like, okay, I read this in this other paper, but this paper says this, or I read this in this book and this thing is saying something else, so why is there a disconnect? And that's when you will become a great person to ask questions that are meaningful. And you never know, you might someday you might end up asking such a major question, and then you find out that it's a really big unsolved mystery in the field of science, and that can be the focus of your graduate work or your postdoc work or whatever it is that you want to do in the field of academia at a later stage. Another thing that you could probably do is make notes in a diary or a phone app. For me, I hate my handwriting. My handwriting is really bad. So I don't really like make notes on a notebook. But if you're kind of old school, that's great, go ahead. You can probably use things like LaTeX. There are a lot of apps nowadays. You can do Todoist. You can use phone apps, or just pick up the phone app on your iPhone or your mobile or your tablet, or your Android phone, or whatever it is, and just take it up and just make small notes of things that you'd want to do. I see something coming up in the chat. I'm just going to have a look at that. All right, so Nina has a question. Nimna, sorry. I wanted to ask whether high school students could do research to encourage it. Yes, Nimna, of course they can, and I'm going to come to that in a little bit, and I'm going to tell you how you can do that in a little bit as well. All right, so like I was saying, making notes in a diary or a phone app, just small keywords or just writing down one or two points that you come up with. Like for me, for example, when I was getting started off, there were a lot of questions that kept coming to my mind, and they still do right now. Like while I'm traveling on the bus, or while I'm traveling and going somewhere, or even when I'm just sitting by myself or thinking about something. Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts in my mind. I'm sure you all as well do. So it's a very difficult. Sometimes you tend to forget things, so it's always good to make a note of it. So like I have like a bunch of research questions or ideas that came to my mind to have a look at later, that I have kept stored in my notes app, and that can be easily accessible at any point of time. So you don't have to go back and search from somewhere, pick out a bunch of papers and stuff. You can just take a look at your notes app on your phone, and then that will like refresh your mind. But one important thing is to note it down as soon as it comes to your mind. All right, so some important tips is, once you've identified your interest or your research area, even if it's broad, it doesn't matter. Like I said, for me, I started off with very broad, and it doesn't really necessarily need to be a very, it doesn't need to be general or very specific. It can be anything, right? So you don't have to really worry about, oh, is it too broad, or should I be more specific? It's fine. I mean, when you're getting started, of course, even people after finishing their PhD don't really know what exactly is their research interest, because they want to know more. And I think that's great, because there's no end, there's no foundations, right? So you can dive deeper and deeper if you want to. So get started on reading scientific papers. So the first step, like I said, would be books or blogs or magazines. But once you've done that, kind of come to more of actual research, like scientific papers. And I'll tell you why this is helpful, because it will give you an idea of how papers are written, and what kind of language, what kind of tone you're supposed to use. And that will be useful for you at a later stage. I think somebody has entered the waiting room. Maybe you could admit them. Sorry. All right, so then the next thing is breaking down research papers. So the why, the how, and what is addressed in the paper, and how it tends to tackle the research question is very important. So once you've read through the research paper, let's say you take like maybe 6 months to familiarize yourself with how to read research papers, and just read papers one after the other. Then the next 6 months you could probably spend, or 6 months, or maybe 2 months, you could probably spend on breaking them down in terms of making notes or highlighting important things. So just highlight 3 things from each paper that you read. Like for example, so I actually went, I was a visiting research student at the Kyoto University's cognitive neuroscience lab, where I went to learn more about the impact of transcranial magnetic stimulation on the brain. And so yeah, so when I was there, I think I was there for a month, and the first 1 week, the professor just gave me like a bunch of papers to read, and those and the professor whose lab I was visiting actually was directly guided and supervised by this person called Kujirai, and Kujirai was actually one of the pioneers in the field of TMS, back in the long back when TMS was first started. So that was, I think that was back in the turn of the century, or maybe mid 50s, 60s. I'm not exactly sure of the dates, bad with dates. So yeah, so that's something that really intrigued me. So what I did for the first 1 week was I used to sit down, sit with a cup of coffee and like a big sandwich in front of me, and just take the papers that were pioneers in the field of TMS, and just take a highlighter or something that, whatever comforts you and you find comfortable, and just highlight the why and the how and what. So maybe like three important things. So why this study was done, that usually it gets covered in the introduction section or the justification, which talks about the need for the paper. The how is usually addressed in the methodology, and to a certain extent, the what is also addressed in that. And then if you read through the discussion, that gives you more of like more detailed information about the why and the how and the what all together intertwined. So I just kind of highlighted those things, and so I think you can take time to do that, and you don't need to necessarily do that all throughout your life. Once you're beginning and you're getting started off, I think if you know how to kind of pick that up, which if you do it with a couple of papers, then I think you will be good to go. And then you can, probably then once you look at a paper later on, you will automatically come to understand why the why, the how, and what. Then make a note of one or two most interesting findings from that particular paper. So it's always good to, if you have that saved in your PDF on your computer or on your phone, it's always good to open a comment on your PDF tool, and then just add that right there itself so that you can revisit it later. Or if you have the hard copies of it and if you like writing or decorating and stuff like that, which I completely hate. But yeah, it's to each their own. So you can follow whatever pattern suits you. So you can take a note of that, and you can probably use different colors of pens or whatever suits you, and just make a note of it at the bottom, that why, what were the two most interesting findings according to you from the paper. And that actually can help you start off with your critical analysis skills, because it will make you and encourage you to think more about why the study was done, what was the need for it. And then that will actually help you to align your thoughts more and in a better manner in the future. All right, so then another important thing that you should do is take a note of all the primary authors or the co-authors of the paper and their affiliations, see where they are from. Maybe you can just start off with seeing where they are from, because then you would know that, okay, this is the kind of research that is happening in this place. For example, for me in TMS, there's a lot of research that's coming out of the UK and out of Israel and out of, parts of Europe, and of course in the US as well. So by now I know what labs are working on it, at least around most of the world. I know what labs, what are the authors. If I see their names, I can say that, okay, this person has probably written this paper. So that comes with experience. So by now I'm quite familiar with where are the labs, where is the work going on, what are the universities wherein a lot of research output in this area of interest that I have is coming out from. And so the more you like read papers, the more you note down about specific professors and specific labs, the more you will be able to understand where the best of research is happening. And that can help you later on as well. All right. The next thing is online internships. So online internships is something that is interesting and that's happening a lot nowadays. I don't know how many of you have been had the opportunity to indulge in it, but I think it's something good. And yeah, I mean, the pandemic has definitely given us opportunity to do most things online. So, there are a lot of research internships online. There are lab-based internships. There are company or profit-based organizational internships. Then there are opportunities to volunteer at labs or research institutes over the summer or during breaks from your academic year. Then there are RA positions or research assistant positions, as well as openings for undergraduate students. So all of this information can be found in, I think, a reservoir of resources, which is Twitter. So Twitter I know there's a lot of nonsense also that happens on Twitter. There's a lot of bullying, but if you see at the positive side, and if you are on Twitter, I am on Twitter and I follow mostly all the neuroscience schools and the PIs that I'm interested in and the labs that they are from. And Twitter is a great way to come to know about different opportunities, because everybody keeps retweeting, and then if there are like open postdoc positions, PhD positions, it's a great place to know about what is happening in the world of academia in brief. And so everything is there in your digest, and you have access to a lot of information at the fingertips. Another way to go about with it would be to, if you know the primary author of the paper that you like, and you know their affiliation, usually if you go to PubMed, or if you're reading a paper, especially if it's like related to neuroscience, there will be like something written at the bottom which will show their affiliation. You can expand, there's a plus sign which you can click on. It shows the affiliation of all the authors and the co-authors, and you can click on that and you can see what lab they are from, and you can go just type that lab into Google, and you can see if they have, each lab will have like a contact form if they do have one. If they don't have one, it's always good to check out for there will be like another option set which will say current openings, so it would be good to check out current openings as well. And there are a lot of summer research fellowships that you can do. For example, the Indian Academy of Sciences allows summer research fellowships. If you are in the US, Canada, or North America, there's there's the SURFs, the Summer Undergraduate Research Fellowships in different universities, which is great. It's a great opportunity, and I'm sure you all must be aware of the SURFs by now. And then you can go onto the university websites and check out more about them. There are a few that I think most of them are for permanent residents or citizens of North America. But if you're an international student, I think some of the universities like Caltech and Rochester allow you to do these internships in your third or fourth year of your undergraduate, so your sophomore year or your senior year, I think, if I'm saying that correctly. But yeah, so in India, I think it's the third or the fourth year of your undergraduate degree. The next thing is about like lab openings. So you can find out about lab openings from there as well. In the Europe, I think there's MyTax in Canada, MyTax Global, and that's mostly for engineering students to go to Canada. Then there's the Dad Weiss Fellowships. There are Max Planck Institute fellowship, engineering internship opportunities. But I think the Max Planck ones are at a halt right now because of the current COVID restrictions in Germany. But yeah, there's like a bunch of them. So you can just go and check out the pages. I am just telling you the names of the most famous ones, but you can do that. Or you can even do it by cold emailing a professor like I did. So yeah, that's about the internship and the research fellowship opportunities. So like I mentioned over here in the bullet point at the end, the above can be paid or unpaid. So make sure you're incentivized. So if it is a paid opportunity, all right, so Pragati asks a question: when I read a research paper, the amount of new information and terms that come up put me off at times. Did you ever get overwhelmed by it? How did you continue to despite? Okay, that's a great question, Pragati. I'm going to answer that. All right, so like I was saying, the above can be paid or unpaid. So if it is an unpaid internship, make sure that you're incentivized well. You get a letter of recommendation, which is a good one from them. You get a certificate on something like that. I personally have a bad experience of doing a research internship with a for-profit organization, which was unpaid. I worked with them, and they just gave me like a one-page LOR, which was not even detailed, and I was pretty upset about it towards the end of it. So I think it was kind of like my fault also there. I should have kind of established clear lines of communication with them in terms of my expectations, because of course I am there for the learning experience, but I also need to be incentivized, and there is nothing wrong in asking for an incentive. Let me make that very clear to you. Don't think that because you're junior or because you don't know, you shouldn't ask, but you definitely should. You have every right to, because I mean, that's my personal opinion, because you are working for them in some capacity or the other, and it is helping them, right? So for example, for my case, it was a lot of like literature review and literature work, but I wasn't happy with the recommendation that they provided me, but I kind of let it go because I was just like, okay, I have a lot of other things on my hand right now, so that's great. But if it's just like one internship that you've done and you are unhappy with the incentives that they have given you, then and if that internship heavily, and you heavily depend on that internship to make your case for undergraduate admission or graduate admission, make sure you get good letters of recommendation which are detailed, and get certificates and other things from them if they're not paying you. All right. So to answer Pragati's question, I completely did get overwhelmed. I still get overwhelmed now because, so for my speaking specifically from my experience, like I'm a clinician. I did my undergraduate studies in a medical field. And so when I look at things which are related to computational neuroscience or programming, even though I'm learning it step by step, there are things that I don't know. And so let me tell you one thing, Pragati, there is absolutely no way, and this is something that I have come to a hard realization to, there's absolutely no way that you're going to know everything in the world in the particular field of interest that you hold as well, right? So even if I'm talking about neuroscience, there's no way in eternity that you're going to know everything about neuroscience. I cannot know everything about cellular neuroscience, molecular neuroscience, clinical neuroscience, developmental neuroscience. There are so many computational neuroscience. There are so many branches and sub branches and categories of neuroscience. There is no way you can know everything perfectly. And I understand completely where you're coming from, wherein you read a research paper and you read like 15, 20 jargon terms and you're just like, oh my God, this is too much. What is this? I don't understand what they're saying. And that's actually something that is sad because, a lot of papers are, written in such a manner that they're so poorly written and there's so much of jargon included in them that it's very difficult to follow through. And I have been overwhelmed. I still get overwhelmed when I read. And so something that I do is if I'm not able to understand the term a lot, I just Google it and try to read some science direct topics. So if you Google a term, usually what happens is if it's a scientific term, there is a science direct topics which comes up. So the science direct topics will actually link you to books and papers that have addressed that or defined that in some way or the other. So you can probably go back and read it from the science direct topics. If that doesn't solve your purpose, you could note it down and then see if you can read some more papers. Like for example, for me, that one term was let's say, yeah, so for TMS, because my area of interest is in transcranial magnetic stimulation, for me, it was LICI and SICI. It sounds funny, but LICI actually stands for long-term intercortical inhibition and SICI stands for short intercortical inhibition. So I had a lot of difficulty understanding these terms and what they mean, like stand for. So even till now, I kind of like struggle to understand in which areas is LICI affected, in which areas is SICI affected, what is cortical silent period in TMS, and how these are, these differ from state by state in different various states, disease states. So I read up on the science direct topics and I did get some insight into it. I took notes of it. I read some papers on it because a lot of my work is review based. So reading a lot of papers also helps because different papers have addressed it from different aspects. So that helps again. If you don't understand even after all of this, a good thing would be to go back to a book which has basics of neuroscience. So sorry, I'm talking from a neuroscience perspective because I am like more interested in neuroscience. But if you are like from some other field like public health or something like that, it's really helpful to kind of go back to the basics, and the basics are books. Even though they are older editions, I think older editions of books actually have explained concepts in a better way. Like for example, I can say that the Candles for Neuroscience is quite a good reference book to start from because it tells you a lot about the basics of neuroscience. Another good way to understand a topic or to understand a term, if it can be found in a book, would be to go back to a book if the journals or the science direct topics don't do it for you. And if that also doesn't work, a good thing, the best thing would be to just email the person who has written the paper. And this usually does not go to waste because people who read your paper, and if there's, so if, for example, if I wrote a paper and if somebody emails me saying, hey, I didn't understand this in your paper, what did you mean by this? I think I will be more than happy to like catch up with them and explain to them. Most of the co-authors, most of the times, I think 95 to 97% of the times are really responsive, especially when people ask them questions about their research. And you can directly write to them, all right? So you can, don't feel hesitant. You can directly write out to them and tell them that, okay, I didn't understand this term in your paper. Can you please explain this to me? Would you be willing to, catch up over a brief conference call and explain this to me? And I think most of the time people are really responsive and they will understand and they will help you out. And another way could be to like ask a professor from your university or your college who has expertise in that particular area or field that you are interested in, and they will be able to help you out as well. All right, so I hope that answers your question, Praviti. And then you can also reach out to maybe like seniors if your professors are not that approachable. I understand that can be a problem in certain universities. So if your professors are not that reachable or approachable, you can ask probably seniors from your university or college. You can ask somebody who is a little bit more advanced in their academic education. For example, if you are an undergrad, you can probably ask a master's student, or if you're a master's student, you can probably ask a graduate student or a postdoc as well. So usually a graduate student or a postdoc might be a little bit more approachable and might have more ability to help you out than a PI who is very busy. All right, so I hope that answers your question. All right, so the next thing is where to look for how to apply. Let me just check the time. Okay, I think I have about 15 minutes left. So I'm just going to quickly go through where to look for how to apply. So things that you could do is fill in the application form. So I know that a lot of websites of labs have application forms embedded into their web page. So you can fill that out and express your interest, like contact forms or things like that. You can fill that out and express your interest to be a part of their lab. If there is no open current call for research assistants, volunteers for the lab, interns, etc., it's always good to send an email introducing yourself to the contact focal person. Sometimes it is a good idea to direct your queries to the lab assistant or the lab coordinator rather than to directly approach the principal investigator of the lab. So let's say that the principal investigator of the lab is me, and I have so you need to understand that professors are probably receiving hundreds of emails every day. So you cannot blame them if they miss out your email. So because they're extremely busy people, they are part of societies, professional societies, they have teaching work to do, they have research work to do, they are corresponding authors for journals where they are submitting their papers, they have grant work to do, they have administration work to do, they are answerable to authorities, they are answerable to organizations that fund their research. So they're answerable to probably your industry partners. So there are a lot of things that PIs are doing at all times. So you really can't crib and complain and cry. But despite all of this, I think 99% of the time, all the PIs that I have reached out to have been extremely approachable, and they have reverted to my email. Even if they weren't able to help me within their capacity, they have told me about it, except for maybe one professor who got back to me after 3 months. But yeah, I find that you also need to have an understanding attitude that if you have reached out to them, give them some time. So like I said, sometimes it's a good idea to first direct your, so more or less every lab will have either a graduate student who is the lab coordinator, or will have another postdoc who is a lab coordinator. So since they are not the PI and they're probably not that busy, even though they're definitely busy, so you should not underestimate them. Even though they are definitely busy, it's always a good idea to first email and reach out to a lab coordinator and ask them that this is my interest, so I'm this and this, I'm really interested in the lab, the research that's happening in your lab, and I'm really interested to work with Dr. So and so. Could I please know if there's any current opportunity to contribute or volunteer for your research? If you are based in the primary country that the lab is also based in, ask them if you can do it, and if there are not any COVID restrictions, ask them if you can do it in person. If not, then ask them if you can contribute remotely as well. All right, so networking goldmine is composing a cold email. And somebody had asked a question a while back if they can start off with research as a high school student. You absolutely can. And if you haven't, then I would urge you to start off right now from this very moment itself, because there is no better time to start. I mean, I really wish I had started off as I started off as an undergrad, but I wish I would have started off when I was in high school or middle school for that matter, because I absolutely love doing research. And I think I would have been so much more happier if I would have found my sense of purpose a little earlier ahead in my life as well. So it's not too late for you. So please go ahead and start off like I said, do not ever feel underqualified, or do not feel that you are less than, or you don't know enough. I mean, you can possibly have, if you're 15 years old, you can't possibly know everything. You can't possibly have a PhD. So you don't think that, okay, I don't have a PhD, or are they going to respond to me? Do I not know things? Don't feel like that. So don't feel that, because you don't have knowledge or because you're not related to that particular field. If you're willing to learn, I think that's the most important thing, that attitude and that openness and that willingness to learn. I know it's very easy to say that, like even I still face difficulties in in terms of like being more of like a clinical person, but then also, having interest in a field where there is some amount of computational aspects involved. So it is difficult for me to come to terms with, facts like, okay, I probably am not a novice, or an ace in coding or programming, but then I need to understand what my strengths and my benefits are. The amount of clinical exposure that I have got, I think that is comparable, and that is just as good as somebody that knows programming language, because I have been working with the grassroots and the problem at the grassroots level, which is the disease itself. So I have a lot of clinical insight in terms of what works and what doesn't work. So everybody has a different level of expertise, and there is no end to learning. And even till now, I have difficulties coming to terms with this. So I definitely understand if you have difficulty or if you have low self-esteem, thinking that I'm not good enough, but I can assure you that there's always a great place to start off. And the great time and the great place is right now. So don't be reluctant when it comes to that, just start off. And then you can pick it up on the way. Like, for example, I also face difficulties, and I have been facing challenges coming to terms with, okay, I'm not that great at programming. I need to learn more of it. And that's a constant battle that I have with myself. But at the same time, that's not going to stop me from what I'm doing currently. All right, so in terms of cold emailing, it's very important to send a cold email from your institutional email address. This is something that I've come to realize after a long time, and I came to realize this only a while back. So if you are an undergraduate in a university where you can be given in an institutional email address, or your high school gives you an institutional email address, it's great to make use of it, because most of the times a Gmail, Hotmail, Rediff mail, Yahoo mail, whatever mail ends up into the spam, and then you can't really blame the professor or the person that you're emailing to not respond, because it's ending up in your spam. There have been emails from other students who have reached out to me, asked for tips and advice, and it has ended up in my spam a lot of times. So it does become difficult to keep a track of it. So if you do have access to an institutional email, please use that for outreach. So how you compose a cold email, I think you all might be having a rough idea of this by now. So give a brief introduction, state what you're doing right now. If you're a high school student, state that, what grade or what year you are in. If you are an undergrad, state what your major is, what your minors are, if you have majors and minors. State your interest, state where you're located, clearly outline your interest in the lab. So don't be vague. Try to give a specific, or if possible, a clear picture, even if not a very specific picture, but a clear and a broad picture of your interest in the lab, what exactly it is in the lab that interests you. And that will set you apart from other, because remember, professors are receiving tons of thousands of emails in a year. So why do you, in order for you to make them notice your work or notice your email, you need to be very specific. I need to show them that you're really interested in their work. Then express your interest to contribute to or volunteer for a particular role or a position. For cold emails, you can probably, so for me, because I could not contribute in the personal capacity, I wrote to them asking if I could contribute in a remote capacity, working with them or collaborating with them on a review paper or things like that. And that has worked for me, like, I think 5 out of 5 times. I reached out to 5 professors, and all 5 of them responded to me. I wrote a paper with a professor, which has been published in Frontiers in Cognitive Neuroscience, Frontiers in Human Neuroscience under the Cognitive Neuroscience section. And this happened over a span of like 6 or 7 months. There are 2 current collaborations that I'm working on with professors. So yeah, it was all great, and I was lucky that they were really supportive. And one of them is also, going to write me my letter of recommendation from my graduate school applications. So it was like, they were really approachable, and that's what I said. Like, if I would have had that doubt in me that, oh, okay, they're not going to respond, the worst thing that's going to happen is that they're not going to respond. So that's the worst thing. It's not like you're going to lose out on something major. So you might be a bit disappointed, but remember that that person is not the only person that's working in your field or your area of interest. There may be thousands of others, and you can always try with other people, and you should always try with other people. All right, so then outline your interest or your skills or your experience. So for example, if you're in high
high school, always try to mention how your interest came out of, what piqued your interest in that particular area. If you're an undergrad, if you've done a couple of remote internships, or you've done a couple of volunteering work at labs, or if you have been, doing some work at a lab over the summer, it's always good to underline your interest and mention that. And then, of course, attach a CV or a resume and a proof of work if possible. So making a beginner's resume or CV is available at this website, Columbia Edu Resources. These are something that I kind of followed, or you can even look at the CVs of current graduate students in labs. Most of them have, a link to the CV on their lab website pages. You can just click on that and your CV gets downloaded. And you can probably follow a format that they did, because most of them have great formats. You can also look at some other resources. I would suggest making your CV on your own on Word, rather than using flashy apps and things like that, which are too, like, I would say, which are uh, too designy and things like that. So avoid that. Try to keep it formal. So difference between CV and resume, I'm sure you all know that, is the CV is more longer and it's a detailed document accounting for your academic performance, has your grades, your GPAs, your SATs or whatever if you've taken them, your credentials, your skills, and it is variable in length. So usually it can be up to 2 to 4 pages. Then your resume is just a brief, or it's usually a one-page thing. It's a more succinct and brief account of your experience and your skills. All right, so before you begin with reaching out to professors, some things that you need to know is to think about your strengths. Take time to identify your skills. So I would say spend around 2 to 3 months to see what you really are good at. Are you good at like writing? Are you good at conceptualizing? So what are things or strengths that you want to develop or work on? And reach out to the particular researcher that you're interested in to see if they can help you out with those kind of things. Prioritize and categorize your skills. Make your CV or your resume very appealing. And by appealing, I don't mean that you use three different colors and very flashy fonts. Do not do that. I think when you see a couple of examples of CVs, you will understand how to go about with it. Do not add color and random things into your CV. Use correct fonts. Times New Roman is a great font, I think, for CVs. So use Times New Roman. 12 single space or maybe double space is good. Use correct language and keep it formal. Something that I recently also learned was that academic CVs do not contain headshots, so don't include your photo and things like that. Remove identifying information, but yes, of course, you can include your contact information like your primary email address. And get it reviewed. Get your first CV or your resume reviewed by a couple of people. I think by now I have got my CV reviewed by at least 3 to 4 people who are at different professional levels, and they have given me an incredible amount of feedback, and that's been really helpful for me. All right, so LinkedIn and Twitter websites. Do we have time? I want to stop and take questions.
Stuti, we actually have a half an hour gap between this and the next session starting. So feel free to take a few extra minutes if you need to.
All right, sure. Yeah, I think I'll be done in another few minutes. All right, so LinkedIn and Twitter or respective websites are really important. So this is kind of like now I'm delving into the networking aspect. So making the right connections on LinkedIn can help you immensely, because when you're on LinkedIn, the LinkedIn algorithm works in such a way that, when someone likes or comments on something, it gets displayed onto your feed as well. So if you are connecting with the right people in the specific area of interest that you have, maybe graduate students or PIs or things like that, if they are liking or commenting on opportunities or sharing opportunities of research or even their papers for that matter, it's a great way to learn about conferences, to learn about openings, research collaborations. Uh, Another way is Twitter. I think I've covered this a little bit already, but Twitter is a great space if you follow lab pages, university pages, PIs that are there in academia. A lot of PIs in academia are taking to Twitter more and more to communicate their science, to communicate the barriers in science, communicating science. They are doing a lot of scientific communication and outreach through science. So Twitter is a great way. I think I read somewhere a couple of days back that this one guy, he basically wanted to apply to a graduate program, and he was following the Twitter page, the Twitter handle of Duke University, and he was interested in AI and machine learning. And just a few days before he submitted his application, Duke University tweeted that they had just started out with their, I think, a new setting or a center for their AI bioinformatics kind of thing. And he mentioned that in his graduate statement. And I think that's a great brownie point for you, because then it shows that you're genuinely interested in the research program, in the lab, in the professor. I don't think you need to worry so much about all this at the high school or the undergraduate level. But yes, if you are looking for graduate opportunities, I think that's great if you can add in one or two things just to show that you really are genuinely interested in their work on their university or their professor, the particular professor's work. Reaching out to someone on LinkedIn is quite similar to cold emailing. Introduce yourself, try to keep it formal, keep it short on LinkedIn. If you want to send a longer email, a longer introduction, I'd rather do it on email. So just reach out to them with a brief objective of why you're reaching out to them, and then request them if you can probably get their email address for correspondence, and you can follow up with them through an email. That's always great, because on LinkedIn, I mean, yeah, many people access LinkedIn on their phones. So make sure that you don't have to send a long thing on LinkedIn itself. Just ask for their email address. Another thing that you should probably avoid doing is reaching out to professional people, or reaching out for professional capacity on things like Instagram, platforms like Instagram. Even on Twitter, you could probably DM them, but then always ask them for their correspondence address so you can email them, because email by till now is definitely a good formal communication channel. So if you have to reach out on Instagram, for example, I had to reach out to someone on Instagram because I could not find their email address or their LinkedIn handle anywhere. So I reached out to them on Instagram because I saw that they had an active Instagram page that they were active on. So I actually, first I started off and I apologized to them for reaching out on Instagram, because I said that I did not, I mean, I'm aware of the fact that Instagram is not a formal medium of communication, and they were really receptive and they appreciated that. And they actually gave me their correspondence address, and then I corresponded with them. So this is something that shows that you are aware of these basic professional manners, and that shows that you are someone who is interested and someone who takes initiative and takes effort. Another thing is joining networking groups. So join professional societies, memberships, volunteer groups. SN definitely is a great platform. Then, there's IYNA, there's Stimulus. We at Stimulus also try to give opportunities and raise awareness about different things. Then there's a lot more other youth-led neuroscience initiatives, which I'm sure you all might be knowing more than I do. Not just neuroscience, but even STEM related, that are focused on different aspects of STEM. Then there are professional societies that you could be a part of. For example, there's FENS for the Europe Neuroscience Society. Then there's, again, I'm talking more of neuroscience because I am from a neuroscience background. Then there is National Science Policy Network, which I am currently a part of. If you're interested in science policy and advocacy and that kind of thing, so you can be part of SSN, Society for Neuroscience, AAAS, American Academy for the Advancement of Sciences. There are tons of those things. In India, there's Indian Academy of Pediatrics, Neurology, whatever you're interested in. There will be like a price of membership that you can be a member of through different, there are student memberships as well. So just go to their website page and check out what it requires you to do in order to do, get a membership, depending on your profession, depending on your interest, etc. And then attending conferences is another good way to research network, present your past research work in conferences, and you will get, so I know that some conferences are really, really expensive. I think nowadays, many of them are taking to virtual platforms, so they have reduced their registration amounts, or you can always apply to them for grants and things like that. For example, I think in October, I'll be presenting at the International Spinal Cord Injury Organization conference, and our team got a grant of like a good amount of money, which we wouldn't have been able to afford under normal circumstances. But we applied for a spinal cord research grant, and we got the grant, and we will be presenting our work. So there are different grants available for students, and because there is a person, so depending on your current situation, like if you're a student, if you are a graduate student, undergraduate student, if you're a high school student, there will be different opportunities for you to get waivers as well. You can always write to them, and you can always request them for waivers stating that you are currently a student. It will not be possible for you to cover your cover the expenses of registering for the particular conference. And it's always great to conference presentations in conference, because that's a great place to network again. All right, and I think you should know this from the type that you are a student, because when you are a student and you are presenting the research work that you have already worked on, or you have been contributing to in a lab, you are getting more and more exposure that will be very helpful and handy for you once you go into like higher education, like your master's or your graduate school, because during that time, you would be expected to kind of know those things. So it's great if you get started early on it. Although it's not, I completely understand that people come from different backgrounds and not everyone has the same amount of opportunities. But my thing is, grab the opportunities that are available. Take use of the time that you have right now, make use of it, because things are going virtual. And so you can definitely use that to your advantage if you would really like to. All right, so some closing tips before I finish my presentation is follow up. All right, so there's something that you need to know is that, like I mentioned, professors are super busy. They're not going to respond at the first go. So a gentle reminder after a week or 2 weeks is really good. They will usually respond to you after 1 or 2 weeks of um, a gentle reminder. Do not send them a reminder every day or every 2 days. That's really horrible and it's annoying. So you would not want to get a reminder from someone every 2 3 days. If you drop in a reminder after 1 or 2 days, 1 or 2 weeks, they will usually respond. If there are no responses after 2 to 3 follow-ups, like after 2 to 3 or 4 weeks, do not persist, just let it go. Understand that the professor is busy. Sometimes they might respond to you even after like maybe a month or two. So by that time, if you are still interested in collaborating with them or still interested in their work, then definitely go ahead. They will definitely apologize to you for not being able to, not being able to reply earlier. I think right now is a good time. And it's also a busy time because a lot of professors and PIs are going back to their labs. They're setting up labs in person because things are slowly starting to coming back to normal. So there are things that can be happening, multiple things that can be happening at this time. So exercise patience. Always read up about the researcher or the PI before reaching out. You don't want to randomly shoot a cold email saying, I want to do something, give me an opportunity. Nobody is going to encourage that. Do not send generalized emails to all professors or PIs. Tailor make it and customize it. It's always good to probably add 1 or 2 papers that you have read up on of theirs. If you don't have that, that's also fine, but always be specific to the area of interest or area of research that they have. And also like that it would make sense, because if you are interested in, let's say, stem cell biology, and you are reaching out to a professor that is working in clinical neuroscience, with no connection of stem cell biology whatsoever, that shows that you haven't done your background work, you haven't read up on their work, and that they will not respond to you, or that completely is a big put off. So don't do that. Do not reach out to 2 PIs or collaborators from the same research group or lab. That kind of shows that you're just shooting your shot at everyone. So if they are from the same lab or they are collaborators at the same lab, try to avoid sending emails to both of them. I think it's a good thing to always try and keep it personalized as much as possible. Professors will like that. Always be polite and formal in your approach. Thank them for their time. Do not assume what their gender is. Always address them as, Dr. So and so or Professor so and so. That's always polite and that's always formal. Do not give them unnecessary compliments. I think I was reading on Twitter that somebody had reached out to a professor mentioning how cute they were, and I think that comes from, it can be it can be a systemic issue, it can be an issue or lack of awareness because of lack of opportunities. So I'm not criticizing the person who probably sent that email, but I would say that always, if you have the ability to reach out to a professor, you also might be having the ability to comprehend what is right or what is wrong when reaching out to them. So the most important thing is be formal and understand the fact that they are not obligated to respond to you. So don't be rude to them if they are not responding to you in time, because responding to you is probably the last in their priority list because they have so many other things to do. So always be appreciative of the fact that they are responding to you. And then get started early, like I said, senior years of your high school or early years of your undergrad are a great time, because if you have done some collaborations by the time with professors or researchers in your area of interest, in whatever capacity, by the time you are applying to graduate school or going for an advanced degree, it is really helpful for you, as far as I've seen, in my opinion, and depending on the people that I have worked with as well. Then also, like I mentioned, reaching out to graduate students in the lab prior is really great. I have been currently reaching out to graduate students from various labs, and let me tell you that they are the most approachable people in the world. They are always there to help you, and they will reciprocate the help that they have probably received when they were applying to graduate positions. So graduate students are always helpful, and I think if you are in countries like the UK, Canada, US, or even parts of Europe, I think you already have a lot of opportunities in place at your disposal in terms of the opportunities that you have for summer research exchange programs. You have uh, undergraduate placement opportunities, you have undergraduate internships, you have a lot of things. So you have a lot of things at your disposal, so make use of them. If you are from countries like India, there are other opportunities as well to reach out to professors in countries that are outside of India, or even in India, there are summer undergraduate opportunities. There are fellowships and things like that, but they are for specific levels of study. So like if you are in the first year of a master's or final year of your studies, I think some of the research fellowships require you to do that. So keep a note of those things if you are interested in Indian labs or Indian universities. So that might also be helpful. And then in different parts of Europe, I think there's a lot of opportunities in terms of doing research as undergraduate students or high school students as well. All right, so thank you so much for listening. I think that was a presentation. Me at the given email address. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn, and also feel free to reach out to me on Stimulus outreach@stimulusngo.org. Thank you so much for listening, and any questions, I'll be happy to take them.
I think Avni's asked a question in the chat.
Yeah.
They're asking when
I saw that. Yeah, I saw that. So I think I realized it around towards the later part of my undergrad, maybe the ending of the third year or the beginning of the fourth year of my undergraduate degree. I think in fourth year, we had to do a dissertation that was part of my undergraduate degree. So that played a lot. It had a good, it had a great influence on my ability to seek out and do research, and that's kind of where I realized that I'm not cut out for clinical work. I don't want to continue in a clinical field. I would like to do more of research work because I really enjoyed the process of like writing up, and also because, like I said, I like reading and I like I like writing. So that has been something that has been my interest from the beginning. And I think it was a wonderful kind of, moment for me it was like an epiphany for me to realize that, hey, look, I can collate my reading and writing abilities and my research interests, or my interest in my specific profession, or my interest to know more about the brain together in the form of research, because research does require significant amount of ability to read and write well as well. So I thought that, okay, I already have these inherent abilities. Why not combine that for my quest to know more about the brain? And I think my clinical experience also had a lot to contribute to it, because I'm working in a tertiary care hospital where I'm exposed to a variety of cases of neurological disorders, people with rare conditions coming to us who have a lot of rare presentations and manifestations, which really kind of intrigued me to know more and more about the functioning of the brain. And it does so every single day. Like for example, the other day, I saw a patient with frontotemporal dementia who actually had quite a few things intact, which when I compare that to what I have read up in literature, did not have all the similar symptoms or manifestations in terms of visual perceptual abilities. And that kind of really intrigued me. And I don't think there are a lot of countries in a lot of hospitals in India which gives you the kind of exposure that I have got to see such a wide range of neurological disorders. And so that kind of really intrigues my interest, and that is how it did intrigue my interest a lot more. I also have a personal cause because my father had a stroke last year, and so he's doing really well by God's grace. He's recovered really well, but it kind of gave me a personal motivation as well to continue further in research related to neurological disorders, just to see how it can be improved, the quality of life of people can be improved. So I think three major things were my undergraduate thesis, which made me realize that, oh, I'm interested in this, my clinical exposure, which while it made me realize that I like studying about the brain, also made me realize that I'm not really cut out for clinical work, but more for research work. And third is also what made me continue is my personal experience with it. So yeah, I hope that answers the question. Yeah, my experiences actually are quite unique. I know because I have been doing a lot of advocacy work. At the same time, I have been doing outreach work and I have also been doing research work. So I think all of that came through just, just sitting and spending time researching. So like, for example, with networking, one thing great about LinkedIn is that you can see all the things that they have been a part of. So I would look at people who are interesting to me and see what organizations they have been a part of, go to the web pages of those organizations and see if there's an opportunity for me to contribute in some way or the other. So I think that factor also played in because I was always very inquisitive and I still am. And that really helped me to network with right people, like I said, on LinkedIn or even on other social media platforms. It gave me a great opportunity to network with different types of people. And when I network with them, I realized that okay, they have been part of so many organizations. Let me see if I can be a part of those organizations and contribute to the work that those organizations are doing. With research, most of it has been like I said, 99% of it has been through cold emails. And it has really worked for me. And I think that's a great thing that you can do as an undergrad or an early high schooler or somebody who's just starting out with research. So yeah, I think it really was more of like just reading up on people, reading up on what people are doing, reading up things on social media, things on different platforms. Like for example, if you read an article or a blog which is written by somebody, you can look up there. If you find it interesting, you can look them up on LinkedIn and you can see what organizations they have been a part of. And if those organizations' interests align with that of yours, you can always join them in a voluntary capacity. So yeah, hope that answers your question. Thank you. Thank you, Tanya, for your comment. When it comes to writing an SOP, that's a great question. It's something that I'm dealing with myself right now because I'm writing my SOPs for my graduate school admissions. Um, I think one of the major tips that I can give you, I think writing an SOP is a whole session in itself, but I think one of the major tips that I have come across and what I have heard and what I have been told from my professional connections or people who are already in graduate positions or even people who have been guiding me thus far is when you start off, don't look at, of course, look at things that are available on the internet, but don't copy paste it from the internet. And when you start off writing it, don't start off with a preconceived notion by looking at somebody else's SOP. Start off with a blank slate. Like for example, if you looked at someone's SOP maybe 1 month back, just keep that in the back of your mind. But when you start off writing yours, don't just take it from theirs and have that open simultaneously on another tab or document and then see that and then write it, because that's not your experience. So try to be as unique as possible, because your GPAs, your grades, your academics, your medals, whatever, are great. They're all like your things, but then you need to realize that there are other people also who have those things. So your SOP is actually your only ability to showcase how unique you are and why you are unique and tell your story. So it should be a gleaming representation of reflection of your personality. And of course, it should be backed by what's written in your LORs by your professors as well. So always try to keep that in your mind and try to think of your SOP as a slate to kind of, put forward your story, who you are as a person, what is your personality. And that's a great opportunity for you to tell the admissions committee the struggles that you have kind of gone through. Like for example, for me, I don't know if it's a struggle or not, but I perceive it to be a struggle, which is to do so much of research work on top of my clinical duties, which frankly at times is really difficult to manage, because I'd rather be doing research the whole day, but then I have to take out 9 hours of my day. And when I come back in the evenings, I'm so exhausted, but I have to persist. I have to manage my household because, I live alone. I have to take care of those things. I have to take care of my other engagements in outreach and advocacy. So there are a lot of things that I have to manage at the same time. And that is a struggle for me. So that is my unique story. For somebody else, it might be having to take care of a family. It might be having to juggle with a parent with illness. It might be having to juggle with a sibling with illness. It might be having to deal with an illness themselves, living with a disability. So that is their experience. This is my experience. So everyone's experience is very unique. And some of the do's of while writing SOP is to reflect on what you are as a person. Do not copy the experiences of somebody else. Another do would be to get your SOPs reviewed by people. I think this is something that maybe you've come across already. Get your SOP reviewed by a bunch of people from different professional levels across, like, different qualifications. Have it reviewed by at least 2 or 3 people, because they can give you insights. Because when you're writing about yourself, it's always like you try to sound positive, and it gets difficult at times, because you're just like, especially me, because I am a negative person. So, kind of writing positive things about myself is a very big challenge. So it's always great to get it reviewed by a couple of people who do not know you, who have a neutral opinion on you. So that's another thing that I would say is important. And also, when writing your SOP, you have to you can probably have a general format, is what I think I understand. You have a general format ready, but you can, when you send it out to specific schools, keep it, alter it according to the school's program, according to the graduate program offered by that university, what you find unique for that program, and what you find unique in that particular PI or in that particular lab's work. So yeah, these are a couple of things that just come off the back of my mind right now. Hope that answers your question to a certain extent.
Okay, thanks a lot, Stuti. I think we've gone a bit over time now, so maybe we'll wrap up here. And if anyone else has any questions, please directly contact Stuti. I'm sorry, but that's all the time we've got for today. Thanks again, Stuti. That was an amazing session, and I'm sure all of us have learned a lot from it.
Thank you for having me. Have a great day ahead, and all the best for the rest of the presentations.
Thank you so much.